Hi everyone. It is said that the first impression is the last impression, and it thus has to be the best impression. The same holds true for an answer in the UPSC. Whenever you write an answer, you need to make sure that it has a very solid introduction. The introduction should not just be relevant to the question asked, but it should also be succinct, it should be concise, and it should also add value to your overall answer. However, I see several aspirants are very much confused about how to write an introduction. Often I see aspirants writing either too long introductions, which actually eats up the space and it compromises their body and conclusion, or there are also aspirants on the other end of the spectrum who write very short introductions, hardly a line or two, which does not even make any sense. There are also a lot of aspirants who write below average introductions. For example, if there is a question on agriculture and you are opening the answer by writing an introduction like agriculture is one of the most important economic activities of the country, this for sure is a below average introduction. So we need to make sure that the way we introduce the answer, it welcomes the evaluator to read the remaining part of the answer and it keeps his or her interest in reading the remaining part of the answer. It really has to be relevant and to the point. So in this video, we're going to check out different ways of introducing an answer. Okay, so this depends upon the kind of question that you are faced with, but we will now check out 6 different ways to introduce the answer, which you have to keep in mind and follow these guidelines to be able to write wonderful introductions. The first way is to answer the why part of the question. Okay, so this question that you're seeing on the slide is a question that was asked this year in the UPSC GS2 paper. So the question reads, constitutionally guaranteed judicial independence is a prerequisite of democracy, comment. So here you need to ask that why is it that judicial independence is important? Also, one more thing that I want you all to remember here is you have to underline the most important keyword that you feel is there in the question. In this, constitution can also be a keyword, judicial independence can also be a keyword, and democracy can also be a keyword. Suppose an aspirant starts the introduction by talking about democracy. Do you think that is a relevant introduction to this question? I don't think so. It's not a relevant introduction because the most important keyword of this question is judicial independence. So your introduction should not be on democracy, but it should be on judicial independence. So whenever you read the question, you make sure that you underline the most important keyword, which should form a part of your introduction. All right. So proceeding from here, once you have understood that judicial independence is that keyword which needs to form a part of your introduction, you need to ask, why is judicial independence important? So important. So that can form a very good introduction to your answer. For example, judicial independence, we can say, why is it important? Okay, when you answer this question, let us say the introduction can be framed as the judiciary in India is a guarantor of the fundamental rights, or you can say that the judiciary in India is a final interpreter of the constitution. Okay, and it ensures adherence to rule of law. It is due to this that the judicial independence becomes a foundational requirement for democracy. So this can be your succinct introduction. Okay, judiciary in India is a final interpreter of the constitution and ensures adherence to rule of law, which makes judicial independence a foundational requirement of democracy. This can be your introduction, which very briefly tells the importance of judicial independence to any democratic country, especially India. Okay, so in this, through this, we have understood that first we need to identify the most important keyword on which your introduction should be based. And secondly, just ask yourself, why is judicial independence important? Okay, that answering the why question, that why judicial independence is important, can form a good introduction. Here again, you need to be very precise, like how I told. What is the role of judiciary? Final interpreter of constitution and adherence to rule of law. Therefore, judicial independence is important to democracy. That's it. Okay, it is precise, as well as the evaluator also gets to know that you know the role of the judiciary in India, that it is the final interpreter of the constitution, and you know about the concept of rule of law, which is again the central to the functioning of any democracy. Okay, so you have beautifully linked judicial independence and democracy, and that too in a precise manner. So this can form a good introduction. Now let us see another way to introduce a question. Why is the question asked? So, see, precisely whenever UPSC asks any question, there must be some or the other reason behind why that question could have been asked. Okay, so in this was a question that was asked in the GS3 paper. It is saying, what is the status of digitalization in the Indian economy? Examine the problems faced and suggest improvements. Now, what can be the good introduction? See, this is already asking about the status of digitalization, which is the first demand. The second demand is about the problems, and the third demand is to suggest the improvements. Okay, so directly, do you have to begin with talking about the status? Yes, you can. The good way to begin is to ask yourself why UPSC would have asked this question. Why has UPSC asked a question on digitalization? Obviously, because digitalization has been considered to be very, very important by the government. Okay, government has given a lot of focus and emphasis on digitalization. Okay, you can think in terms of how in G20 India has promoting the digital payments infrastructure, DPI. Okay, even in various other fora it is talking about the digital infrastructure, digitalization of the economy, right? So in every aspect, in every field, the government is trying to emphasize digitalization in the economy in order to bring about more formalization, okay, and to reduce issues like corruption. So that is why you can talk about the importance the government has given to digitalization, and that is precisely why this question was asked by UPSC. Okay, because this is hotly and currently in news, because government is pushing digitalization in every field. Okay, you think of in terms of agriculture, you think in terms of the businesses, you think in terms of insurance, you think in terms of payment infrastructure, whatever be the e-commerce. Okay, whatever is the area, government is pushing a lot on digitalization of the Indian economy. So when you ask this question, that why UPSC could have asked this question, is precisely because government is placing a lot of emphasis on digitalization. So this part can form a good introduction to your answer. Okay, so you can say that the Indian government is emphasizing on digitalization in order to ease whatever the benefits you can think of, like ease of doing business or formalization or reducing the interface and corruption. Okay, so because of these, government is giving a lot of emphasis to digitalization of the economy. Okay, so this is how you can introduce questions where you ask that why, what is the reason behind UPSC asking this question. So that reason can be a good introduction for your answer. Now check out the third way, which is this is a very basic and a fundamental way of starting the introduction, which is with the help of definitions. So now in this question, it is saying who are entitled to receive free legal aid. Assess the role of the National Legal Services Authority in rendering free legal aid in India. This again was asked in the GS2 paper this year. So even though the first part of the question is saying who are entitled to receive free legal aid, so obviously you will not start your answer directly by saying that who are entitled to free legal aid. The most basic thing that you will do in this is to introduce by telling what is actually free legal aid. Free legal aid is nothing but providing free legal services to the poor and the marginalized who may not be able to afford the legal services or the services of a lawyer in the case of any legal proceeding before a court or a tribunal or any other authority. Simple. So, the way you introduce this question is by defining what do you understand, what is your understanding about free legal aid. Okay, this is one way of introducing this question. There is another way which I will talk in a while. Okay, so let's also see another question. Discuss the role of the Competition Commission of India in containing the abuse of dominant position by multinational corporations in India. Refer to the recent decisions. So even though the question is beginning by saying discuss the role of Competition Commission, you will directly not start by talking about the role of Competition Commission. You will say a brief definition, or you will introduce what Competition Commission of India is. It is a statutory body, okay, that is formed to enforce what act? Competition Act. Okay, so this is the basic that you will write, and then you will come to the role. Okay, you will say that Competition Commission of India is a statutory body that was formed to enforce the Competition Act. So what does it do? It will make sure that there are no anti-competitive agreements happening. There is no abuse of the dominant position. It will make sure that it provides a level playing field for all the companies, all the entities in the market, okay, the private entities in the market and the public entities, whichever is operating in the market. So there is a level playing field and there is a free and fair competition between all the entities. Okay, this is the role. So, but before you talk about the role, you will talk about what Competition Commission of India is. Okay, so you will introduce Competition Commission of India. So this is like the most basic way and the most fundamental way in which you can introduce your answer. The fourth way of introducing is by respecting the context. See, several times when UPSC asks a question, it usually gives a statement, and after the statement, it asks a question. So I see many of the aspirants who directly start by answering the question, the whatever the real question that the UPSC has asked, without making any comment on the context. But this is to be avoided at all cost. So see, think in terms of the that UPSC has given a context. It has wasted or it has written 1.5 lines of some context for you. If you don't comment upon that, it is like disrespecting this context. Okay, so you need to respect this context and write a couple of lines on that. So briefing about this context itself can form a good introduction. For example, in this case, this question reads, faster economic growth requires increased share of manufacturing sector in the GDP, particularly of MSMEs. So this was a question that was asked in this year GS3 mains. Okay, so basically in providing this context, UPSC is talking about the importance of the MSMEs. Okay, so when you're talking about the importance of MSMEs, we have already discussed this question in yesterday's video on the mains anatomy. So in which we have broken down this question in detail and seen how this question needs to be answered, how we need to form the introduction, body and the conclusion. This we have already discussed in detail, but the point here is that you need to elaborate upon this context. Okay, so you need to tell something about the importance of MSMEs to the economic growth of the country. Okay, like how we discussed yesterday, a brief comment saying that the MSMEs play a catalytic role in India. MSMEs play a catalytic role in the progress of India by contributing nearly 30% to the gross domestic product, GDP. Okay, that is it. The introduction is very short also. It is very precise, but it is also a commentary on the context that is given by the UPSC. And then you will also write a little bit about the importance, because that is what this 1.5 lines, the gist of this 1.5 lines is that it is talking about the importance of MSMEs. So you will write about the importance of MSMEs, that what is it contributes nearly 40%, 44% to the exports of the country, and it is employing nearly 12 crore people. So how much important it is for the socio-economic development of the country. It can reduce the inequalities, it can reduce the rural-urban divide. Okay, so you can write the importance briefly. So all of this will form what? Nothing but the elaboration of the context given by UPSC. Okay, so a good introduction can also be the elaboration of the context given in the question. Okay, and this is non-negotiable. Okay, if the context is given, you cannot just start by just commenting on the policies of the government. You cannot just start by directly answering the question. You are supposed to write a few lines on the context given, and that can form a very good introduction to your answer. The fifth way is to build a background. Okay, now how we need to do this, I'll explain through this example. This again was a question that was asked this year in GS2 mains. Okay, the question reads, explain the structure of the parliamentary committee system. How far have the financial committees helped in the institutionalization of the Indian Parliament? Okay, so the first part of the question is, and remember it's a 15-marker question. The first part of the question is talking about the structure of the parliamentary system. So, but when you introduce this question, you will directly not start by talking about the structure of the parliamentary committee. You will give a brief background about the parliamentary committee system in India. Okay, why we do this? Because this is a 15-marker question where you have the scope of building a little bit of background. Had this been a 10-marker question, maybe you wouldn't build so much of a background and you might directly start by explaining the structure of the parliamentary committee. Because you have to be mindful of the fact that apart from explaining the structure, you will also have to talk about the how far have these financial committees helped in the institutionalization of Indian Parliament, right? So there is a lot to write in a 10 marker. So in a 10 marker, you may directly hit the demand of the question. But in the case of 15 marker, you have to build a little bit of a background. So you will directly not start by talking about the structure of the parliamentary committee system. Rather, you will talk a little bit about the parliamentary committee system. So you can simply say that the parliamentary committee system had probably a British legacy in India. Okay, and it was introduced in order to reduce the burden on the parliament and to bring about some expert opinions to the parliament, okay, to make way for more efficient deliberations, because it comprises of less number of people, and because with more number of people there will obviously be too many opinions and too much of chaos. Too many hands in the broth will spoil the food, right? So that's how it will lead to more efficient deliberations. Okay, these are some of the reasons why the parliamentary committee system came into existence. So this is a background that you will give, and after you give this background, then you start by explaining the structure of the parliamentary committee system, saying that the parliamentary committee system comprises of what term committees, standing committees and ad hoc committees. Standing committees are like these, and ad hoc committees are like these. So that is the structure that you explain. But before coming to the structure, you will say that it was a British legacy. It was introduced in India to reduce the burden on the parliament, to bring in some expert opinions, okay, to have some closed door deliberations where the people are not guided by their party lines, and to act as per their party lines, and there will be more efficient deliberations. These were the reasons why the parliamentary committee system were introduced. After writing this much, you will start by explaining the structure. So in the case of 15 marker question, you need to build a little bit of a background to the question asked. So this will form a very good introduction. All right. So we have seen all the 6 ways of introducing the question, right? There are 2 more things that I want to tell you here. One is that introducing with the help of data. Okay, so data, yes, you can use for introduction, like how we used in the case of MSMEs. Okay, we told that MSMEs play a catalytic role in the progress of a nation, in the progress of the country, by contributing nearly 30% of the gross domestic product. So this is a good use of data in the introduction. So in this case, you're not just commenting upon the context given in the question, but you're also making use of data. So this can form a very good introduction, very precise, and also it is incorporating data. Okay, so that means how you can add more value to your introduction is by using some data or figures. You can use some judgments, or you can use some reports, okay, or you can use some constitutional articles if there is a relevant question. Okay, so these are the ways through which you can make your introduction much more interesting. For example, just now, a couple of minutes before, we discussed a question on free legal aid. Okay, so one way of introducing is, as I told you, was through definition, by telling what do you mean by, is your understanding about free legal aid, which is provision of free legal services to the poor and the marginalized, whatever we discussed. Okay, but apart from that, you can also make use of constitutional articles when you are introducing this question on free legal aid, which is Article 39A, which talks about the free legal aid. Okay, whether it is a duty of the state to make provisions for free legal aid. Okay, so Article 39A. So Article 39A can also be used in the part of introduction of the free legal aid question. So this way, by using some data somewhere, some article somewhere, you can even add further value to your introduction. Okay, so once you know the fundamentals, the 6 ways of introducing the question, and you are thorough implementing this, incorporating these 6 ways in different question as per requirement, then the next step would be to go a step ahead and try to add some more value to your introduction by incorporating, let's say, some reports. Okay, so there was another question in the GS3 paper that was talking about the sea level rise. Okay, so you can, the question itself was talking about an IPCC report. So in such cases, you can introduce your question with the help of IPCC report, which says that there has been sea level rise of these many from this year to this year. Okay, whatever it is. Okay, so once you are thorough with these 6 ways, the next step is to go further ahead and then make use of some facts and figures or some reports or some constitutional articles as you may deem fit, depending upon the question. So these all things can also be incorporated to enhance the value of your introduction. Okay, I hope this was helpful. So this is just a summary slide. You can take a screenshot of this slide and then save it, so that whenever you want to introduce your answer, you can this whole mental map can just click to your mind, and you can choose the most or the best way to introduce the question according to depending upon the nature of the question. Okay, so thank you very much.